Hello, Pranam, and welcome to the second day of Dev Sanskriti Vishwavidyalay's Global E-Summit, wherein we are celebrating the beautiful connection that India and Latvia share with each other. Our Latvian audiences and participants celebrated their Proclamation Day yesterday, and so this E-Summit was also organized as a way to allow for all of our audience members to participate in their celebrations with them and to learn about their wonderful culture. We learned through our sessions yesterday that India and Latvia share common cultural roots, and the similarities and connections between both of these great countries is near impossible to ignore. And today we will be furthering our journey in exploring this beautiful connection. And when we look to learn about any particular culture, there are broadly speaking two approaches that we can adopt. The first approach is to learn about the culture from an external lens, to learn about its external developments and external progress. And the other is to learn about its deeper philosophies and inner facets. And the beauty is that we are going to explore both of these perspectives through our sessions today. And so, without further ado, let us delve right into our session. And we are going to be joined by a set of distinguished speakers today. Our first speaker is the respected Mr. Arnis Silisji, who is the head of the Latvian Yoga School, and he will be speaking on the topic of yoga and complementary and alternative therapy. We will then be joined by the respected Natalia Abrolaji, who is a doctoral candidate at the University of Latvia, and she's studying classical Indology at the Ruprecht Karl University of Heidelberg in Germany, and she'll be enlightening us on the topic of linguistics, history, and culture. This will then be followed by a message from Dr. Sanita Selinaji, who is joining us from the University of Latvia from their Department of Pedagogy, and she will be shedding light on the topic of yoga and complementary and alternative therapy. And then after that, we'll listen to Ms. Jekaterina Frolovaji, who is the head of the Jurmala School of Yoga and is also a member of the Diplomatic Society of Latvia, and will be providing her thoughts on yoga and complementary and alternative therapy. And so I know we are all very excited to commence today, and so we now humbly invite these speakers to share their messages and their thoughts.
India and Latvia, a personal bond. For me, this personal bond with India was rediscovered in distant 1987, when a journey with yoga meditation and Indian culture in general started to occupy my time in my busy and hectic life. And from the beginning it was, and still is in a way, how one should care for the growth, a very personal and intimate bond, as it contacted me with the core of my individuality. Since then, several cycles of expansion and contraction of richly colored yoga paths are spinning around and around. Currently, the main contemplative effort is drawn to avidya reducing and erasing in the collective consciousness. Perhaps it looks like a utopian task, although it brings extra perspective. This perspective is essential for yoga sadhana and seva, along with svadhyaya and self-restraint. But it has several bewildering aspects. I would like to share this with you. The current global crisis calls up to consult with the advice of sages and wisdom of our personal Chit Ananda. Of course, never it was promised that we should play easily with superficially optimistic tunes of wishful thinking. So please, for a moment, let's drive in an unsuspected wound of human identity crisis. Who are we now in this pandemic drama? Victims or evil predators of nature? Maybe innocent bystanders who accidentally got in a way of flying bullet, or perhaps we are criminals denying their crimes but getting deserved punishment. Can we discover the cause of why we fail to fight less and help each other more? Is now nature fighting us back? I may have not the proper answers, but here are some questions under my consideration, more needed for finding a solution. Current global crisis need calls up to consult with our collective common sense as well. How to balance economical welfare, social justice, and ecological welfare without blindfolds on demands for real yoga svadhyaya and soulful creativeness against wishful thinking. What is the best way to examine the perception of reality and potentiality? There should be some questions in a vulnerable state of performing new knowledge. Good sample of wishful thinking is this, that my friend's neighbor in his 50s thought he could win boxing championship without training just because he was high school champion. Getting on the ring, after short preparation, he got a serious knockdown. And only then he realized he should not try to go on fight without good preparation. Soberly inspiring is this quotation of Pandit Sriram Sharma Acharya. Anyone could have the opportunity to be born like human, but not everyone can be blessed to have humanity. From an optimistic, non-acrimonious point of view, we can see deficits of will to respect the basic rights of all sentient beings and empathy for different life forms, as well stopping force of ending violence against nature's ecology is broken. As Patanjali stated, Maitri Karuna Mudita, Upeksha, Sukha Dukha Punya Apunya, Vishanayam, Bhavanatah Chitta Prasadanam. We have to work on this if we consider ourselves a yogi. Through cultivation of friendliness, compassion, joy, indifference to pleasure and pain, virtue and vice, respectively, the consciousness becomes favorably disposed, serene and benevolent. These qualities keep the mind in a state of well-being. Patanjali here lays the groundwork for our journeys toward self-realization.
These risky hurry trips of avoiding unpleasant reality take place during very dark hours of humanity, if not the darkest. The question is, are we ashamed to ask ourselves, to what extent do we avoid looking at the real causes of hierarchical struggle between our good and bad qualities? Maybe we are suffering great post-traumatic syndrome inherited from ancestors, or totalitarian regimes, or colonization, or something unknown. Our collective emotional trends currently are so complicated that we fail to recognize them as rewards or punishment, or as an addiction. In the yoga practice for self-improvement, our research on our emotional and other addictions must be prepared to explore the depths as well as the peaks of life phenomena. Often we do not dare do one or the other, more often both, and even we do not allow the mind to form the idea of its necessity. Carl Gustav Jung did mark important practice in his work Symbols of Transformation. No one should deny the danger of the descent, but it can be risked. No one needs to risk it, but someone certainly will. And let those who go down the sunset way do this with open eyes, or it's a sacrifice which daunts even the gods. Yet every descent is followed by an ascent. The vanishing shapes are shaped anew, and the truth is valid in the end only if it suffers change and bears new witness in new images, in new tongues, like a new wine that is put in new bottles. If we neglect that, then we go under the drama of social cataclysmic events. The increased presence of Islamic terror organizations created not only terror and violence against civilians but also against cultural heritage, became a sad routine in the Middle East and many parts of Africa. From Sufi and Sheikh tombs in Mali and Egypt to entire World Heritage sites such as Nimrud, Hatra, Palmyra, nothing seems to be safe for wanton distraction. These distractions are no petty crimes or unfortunate collateral damage. Access to cultural heritage is considered to be a basic human right. This is Article 27 in Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That is what is pointing us Christopher Doppelhofer. And poet V.H. Auden pointed out, the so-called traumatic experience we are having is not an accident, but the opportunity for which the child has been patiently waiting. Had it not occurred, it would have found another, equally trivial, to find a necessity and direction for its existence, so that its life may become a serious matter. In more than 30 years of sadhana and teaching of my yoga practice, I have encountered various kinds of and scales of often unacknowledged post-traumatic stress disorder. The big trauma referring to sadistic criminal acts, ritual sexual abuse of children, and any human torture of political opponents, genocide, and how unthinkable crime does happen without our consent, does leave a deep imprint on our collective psyche, sometimes lasting for several generations, and small one-time mild fall off a bicycle making bruised knee trauma, this significant aftermath of trauma is not easily erasable. The need to admit to yourself that this hidden fact exists is the first step. The one needs to apply special therapeutic methods of yoga practices, preferably with the assistance of experienced yoga masters. What we do often encounter paradoxical experiences. Are there often alcoholics, workaholics, drug addicts, and other on our path who are poisoned with their unstoppable desires to that scale that we start to learn that it is making us appreciate more the sobriety and learn to feel sorry for ourselves even less. Uncomfortably, we have to admit that current personal and the collective condition is pushing us more towards stopping denial. We are the heirs of many post-traumatic stress disorder syndromes that have to be the first step, as locally so globally. The history and culture of great Bharatavarsha are offering us very, very useful lessons to be learned. The wisdom of numerous sages, Vedanta's revelation and philosophy of metaphysical non-violence is now more relevant for all inhabitants of this common home, Mother Earth. The healing requires an understanding of the disease and effort to obtain then apply to proper therapeutic method. India admirably did this several times during great turbulence of history. Please, can we ask to be granted again those practical blessings and advanced yoga practices from patrons of eternal wisdom? Or now we are underqualified to hold those blessings? To obtain spiritual maturity, many characteristics and parallels between anthropocentric social stereotypes and cultural cliches, between religious dogmatism, secular commercial nihilism, and sectarian nationalism must be appropriately distinguished. Please go on and name them. Please make your list and then find a way to share it with me, with Dr. Chinmay Pandya and others who are really interested to dig the way out. Let's try to get out of the crumbling trenches of this battlefield in the post-traumatic war zone for the human soul. Could it be so that often we are afraid to be stigmatized as outcasts for rebelling against those vulture cliches and stereotypes? We have to ask this, why we are failing to have a clear vision of the dominating pressures of anthropocentric social stereotypes. Those stereotypes and certain homophobic characteristics of narrow cultural cliches are humiliating, enslaving, and grinding us between religious dogmatism, secular commercial nihilism, and sectarian nationalism. So why? Too often we are afraid to be stigmatized as outcasts for rebelling against those vulture cliches and stereotypes. And too often we deny the dignity of our spiritual value.
The friendship between Dev Sanskriti Vishwavidyalaya and Latvian University International Institute of Indic Studies started more than 5 years ago with contributing forces of Dr. Chinmay Pandya and Professor Sigma Ankrava. Together, we have made several important yoga science workshops, seminars, conferences. We celebrated the first Yoga International Day. Then Dev Sanskriti Vishwavidyalaya did establish Center of Baltic Culture and Studies of Asia in the year of 2016. Our yoga students were coming to this Vedic knowledge temple for evaluating yoga studies more than 4 times. And we have an ongoing Sanskrit terminology project as well as several other essential projects in planning. Although the need to widen and make growing sustainability of this cooperation is existential now, more than we did suspect several years ago. Because it is quite obvious that only those efforts are making us more humans, more spiritually conscious beings, in the eternal sense, what it is really the honor and duty to be human, to become the bearers of humanity, aiming at spiritual wisdom without fantasying about it. The life of spiritual heroes like Aurobindo Ghosh, Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Sri Ramacharya, and my guru, Amrit Mahametha, is encouraging not to be afraid of the most desperate development of events while holding on a clear vision of universal dignity and spiritual values. More than 100 years ago, the heroic path of Mahatma Gandhi started in South Africa to employ non-violent resistance and in campaigning for civil rights. And in a way, few decades later, also Latvian independence fighters were inspired differently by this great sample, but with different methods. Patanjali in Yoga Sutras was pointing out to our contemporaries as well the importance of this svadhyaya and self-restraint. Now we have to continue that heroic endeavor with new and original methods integrated with traditional Vedic culture for not only uplifting and enlightening all earthlings of this planet, but also for surviving on this path of sustaining core values of humanity as friends to all beings.
Namo Namaha, Namaskar, greetings from Latvia to all the distinguished guests and audience interested in today's topic, India and Latvia, a special bond. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Chinmay Pandya, Vice Chancellor of Dev Sanskriti University, for inviting me to this event as a speaker. It is indeed a great honor to give my humble contribution in order to strengthen the cultural bond and also to foster the collaboration in the realm of scientific research. Today, I'm going to give a glimpse into the cultural and linguistic bonds between India and Latvia that attract people from both the countries. Although both the countries stand apart some 6,000 kilometers, yet there used to be times in our prehistory when peoples of Baltic Slavic language branch were residing geographically near to the speakers of Indo-Iranian languages. Recent studies in fields of archaeology and genetics provide wealth of evidences for that. However, in this presentation, I will focus more on linguistic propinquities between the Latvian language and Sanskrit. And now let me share my screen with you. So, thus, I would like to start with Thomas Burrow's quotation given in his comprehensive study on Sanskrit language. The only thing that emerges clearly is that there did at one time exist a special relationship between early Indo-Iranian languages and those dialects of Indian European which developed eventually into Baltic and Slavic languages. Now, before we begin delving in the linguistic intricacies, I would like to give a brief insight into a geopolitical layout of the Baltic ethnic groups at around 12th century CE. Archaeological findings provide evidences that humans inhabited modern-day territory of Latvia starting from circa 11,000 BCE, right after the glaciers of Ice Age began receding. However, we can speak about the genesis of Baltic ethnic groups during late Neolithic period, circa 2300 till 1500 BCE, which is directly linked to the newcomers from Yamnaya culture, circa 2900 BCE. And those were the Indo-European peoples who brought corded ware culture and boat-shaped war axes. As you can see in the left side image, in the 12th century CE, the contemporary territory of Latvia was inhabited by 5 Baltic ethnic groups, and there we can see Curonians in the green color, Leaves, or sometimes also called Livonians. Their language belonged to Finno-Ugric language branch. Then Selonians and Latgalians. Oh, I'm sorry, Semigalians, Latgalians, and Selonians. In this map on the right, you can see the Baltic territory coverage by the Baltic ethnic groups circa 500 BCE. And as we can see in this map developed by Lithuanian archaeologist, later archaeologist Marija Gimbutas, the layout remained nearly the same in the 12th century, and here we can see more distinctively the tribal borderlines. Talking about modern Latvian language, we can say that modern literary Latvian language is based on Semigalian and Western Latgalian sub-dialects. Now let me walk you through some bonding facts about Latvian and Indian cultures. Both of the cultures have preserved wealth of orally transmitted folklore and traditions. Both in India and Latvia, folk heritage and sacred texts of India were written down comparatively very late. There we can see that in Latvia, the Folklore Institute has collected and preserved nearly 3,000 folklore items, folk songs, proverbs, fairy tales, spells, etc. And of course, there is an immense Vedic text corpora. As the basic one, we can call Samhitas, Brahmanas, Aranyakas, and Upanishads. What is interesting that the cabinet of Dainas, these are folk songs. The core songs consist of nearly 218,000, with variations that number reaches to 1.3 million. It's interesting that this corpus of folk songs was included in the memory list by UNESCO in 2001. And similarly, Rig Veda, with its 1,028 hymns and 10,600 verses, was also included on the list of memory by UNESCO in 2007. As I already mentioned, basically both folklore heritage materials, and they were transmitted orally. And remarkable is also the fact that even though in India the writing system developed far much earlier than in Latvia, that is sometime at around 400 or 500 BCE, as two writings, Brahmi and Khroshti, and yet the firstly written down sacred texts we can account to sometime at 500 CE. These were some Upanishads discovered by Michael Witzel, and more extensively writing down of the Vedas started sometime at 1500 CE. And as we can see in the Latvian case, the first printed 11 folk songs were published by Herder in 1778, and then only the extensive collection of folk songs began. After a brief insight into propinquities among the cultures, I would like to finally immerse into the pool of linguistics. And here this image shows one of the versions of Indo-European language tree, where you can see that the Eastern Baltic, two Eastern Baltic languages, Lithuanian and Latvian, are the closest cognates alongside Armenian and also Slavic languages to Indo-Iranic languages. And this image will briefly introduce to the findings of such scientists as Ringe et al., which were conducted by help of computational methods, namely perfect phylogeny, and also included in Koch's research on the formation of Indo-European language branches. As it can be seen in the image, the Baltic and Slavic languages are most cognate to Iranian and Indic languages and were formed during the sixth stage of splitting from Proto-Indo-European languages. And as Ring et al. Asserts, Proto-Indo-Iranian could be thought of as dialect within a still intact larger linguistic unity and speech community. Hence Proto-Indo-Iranian, Balto-Slavic in this case. Moving on to the main part of this presentation, I will finally outline the main common characteristics of the two linguistic cognates, Sanskrit and Latvian. And here I have applied morphological typology based on Edward Sapir's three major typologies according to measure of their indices of synthesis, polysynthesis, and fusion. And according to this typology, both of the languages, Latvian and Sanskrit, can be typologized as fusional synthetic languages. What's interesting that Sanskrit has 8 cases, Latvian has 7 cases. What is missing, that is ablative. In Latvian contemporary language, we still have 6 declinations for nouns, whereas it is known that in Sanskrit there are more than 24 types or paradigms of declinations, talking about verbs, in Latvian language we have three major conjugation groups, and also altogether with subgroups they build up 9 subgroups in total. Whereas in Sanskrit we have 10 ganas or classes of verbs, and basically known as Parasmaipada and Atmanapada, and some of them fall into both of them. In modern Latvian language, we have 2 genders, feminine and masculine, although there are some traces of neuter gender as well, which we will see in a minute. And Sanskrit has preserved all 3 genders, feminine, masculine, and neuter. And talking about number, currently in Latvian we have singular and plural, although academic Enzelins has done a research, and he has traced that there used to be a dual number as well. And in Sanskrit there are all 3 numbers. Now let's delve into some actual samples, different lexical cognates, and let me start with cardinal numbers. And here you can see that except for 1 and 9, the rest of the numbers are both written the same if we talk about Roman script or Latinic script, and pronounced. So let me do this for you. In Latvian viens, Lithuanian vienas, Sanskrit eka. That is the different line. And starting with 2, it's divi, du, dvi, tris, tris, tri, četri, keturi, čatur, pieci, penki, panchan, seši, šeši, šaš, septiņi, septini, saptan, astoņi, aštuoni, aštan, deviņi, devini, navan, desmit, deshimt, dashan. And what's important that similarly like in Sanskrit, also in Latvian, the cardinal numbers, or actually any numbers, are declined the same as in Sanskrit. So here we have a sample ekam pushpam, which means 1 flower in nominative, and in instrumental with 1 flower, that is declined like ekena, pushpena. And similar processes take place also in Latvian. So 1 flower, it's viena puķe, nominative, and in instrumental it's ar vienu puķi, with 1 flower. Now let me demonstrate you the most basic verb to be, which is in Sanskrit that is bhu, and in Latvian that sounds būt, again very, very similarly phonologically. And here I have marked with a color the most similar forms. As you can see, let me read it for you. I am is asmu, aham asmi, tu esi, tvam asi. What's interesting that in Latvian we have 4 types of a vowel e. I mean a long and short version, e and e, and also narrow and broad pronunciation. So here we pronounce it nearly as a, very broad a, because the next syllable contains a vowel u. So that's why it's pronounced asmu. Whereas in the next esi, it is pronounced as a narrow e, because the next syllable contains a vowel e. Then we have, which is not so similar, viņš ir, so he is, saha asti, she is, viņa ir, sa asti, it is, tas tā ir, tat asti. So here we can see some traces of neuter gender. And then we have the next very similarly phonologically sounding we are, mēs esam, vajam smaha, jūs esat, jūjams tā. Next, they are, viņi, or sometimes we can also address non-living objects as tie. So this is again a sort of a trace of neuter gender. Viņi ir, tie ir. Te santi, which we can see is very, very closely resembling to Sanskrit. They are, viņas, tās ir, tāhā santi, and they are neuter, tie tās, tāni santi. A very interesting selection of words are those ones which describe the most basic items or domestic animals, for instance, as in this case, that were known to prehistorical people, and there we can see nearly almost the same phonological resemblances. Like sheep is pronounced as avs in Latvian, in Sanskrit it's avi, male goat or ram, āzis, Sanskrit aja, cow, govs, gaus, again, very, very similar. Then we have a word dhenu, which is by itself a very interesting word because that has been derived from the Sanskrit root duh, which means to milk. And from this word we have duhita, which means daughter. And we will recognize in English language daughter. In German language we will recognize tochter. And in Lithuanian, dukte. So moving on, the next animal, bull, is in Latvian vērsis, older version, or bullis. Vrshabha, vota, ūdens, sounds similarly as in Vedic times, udan. River or flowing water, upe, which was considered as divine waters, apas in Vedic texts. Milk or prepared milk, piens or pājasa, from pajas or pējam. Deer, asara, asra or ashra. Food, eating, ēdiens, ēšana, ashana. And very interesting two words that denominate word or speech. So in Latvian that is vārds, and if we swallow or do not pronounce properly R, then we have nearly the same, vārds. And in Sanskrit that's vāč, speech, and also goddess of speech personified. And praise or sacrificial text or words known in Sanskrit as rich, in Latvian that is runa, and in this case in Russian, which is Slavonic language, this has the most closest cognate that sounds rich. Now, just to give you a few samples of verbs, and again describing the very simple or domestic or agrarian activities, or some simple emotions, the most basic emotions which were known to the people, very ancient people. For instance, weep or cry, raudāt, in Sanskrit rodati, he or she cries. To fear, bīties, baidīties, bijāt, again very, very similar. Bhi, bibhēti, bhījate. To yoke, jūgt, yuj, junakti, junjati. To run away, get liberated, mukt. Moods, which is imperative, like run. And Sanskrit, again very similar, much, munjati. To burn, degt, dah, dahati. To eat, ēst, ad, ati. Lead, carry, vest, vākt, vāķīt, vah, vahati, vakshi. And here, again, this is a very interesting verb because probably we have noticed that Vah, vahati is also very close cognate to English wedding, and in Latvian we have the same word for this wedding process, vedības, and the young bride was called vadakla. And to end up with the verb to go or walk, iet, ieti, more archaic, ieti. As we can see, they all look and sound very similar. Now, just to give a little insight into the formation of some divine objects, divine concepts. For instance, from the root, Sanskrit root div, we have in such languages as Sanskrit, Avestan and Lithuanian and Latvian and Old Prussian and Latin and Greek, we have developed the concept of God, which sounds in this way. So Dievs or Devaha, Daeva in Avestan, Dievas in Lithuanian, Dievs or Dievis in Latvian, Deivs in Old Prussian, Deus in Latin, and Zeus in Greek. And this concept has actually derived from the concept of something bright or shining. And as we know, day in English sounds very similar to Latvian diena, and Latvian diena is even sounding more similar to Sanskrit dina or dina. Sky or heaven, debes, divya or dievs. Celestial as an adjective, debasu, divyaha, divyam, divijaha, divishtaha, daivaha. And sky, debes, dievs or diev. And here it is also worth mentioning a very ancient Proto-Indo-European deity as Parjanya, which is the god or deity of the rain and thunder. And in Latvian we also have similar deity called Pērkons. In Lithuanian this deity is called Perkūnas, and in Russian Peruň. So there is already some research done in that, but these are very interesting similarities. Now let me move on to more concrete samples grammatically. So as I have already mentioned earlier, then both in Sanskrit and in Latvian, the word order in the sentence is comparatively free. Then we can find absolutely 100% coincidence with the use, talking of the use of genitive case or shashti vibhakti called in Sanskrit. For instance, we have a sentence, Grihasya samipe balaha kridanti, and we have 4 lexemes in Sanskrit, which means in German, in der Nähe des Hauses spielen die Kinder. And we have 8 lexemes if you want to translate. In English, we have children are playing or play in the vicinity of the house, and we have even more lexemes. But in Latvian, we can interpret this sentence with the same number of lexemes, bērni spēlējas mājas tuvumā. And we can see that the construction is the same, and the use of the consonant S in production of genitive is also the same. Now, just to give another grammatical sample, let me just give you some more sentences. So if we compare participles, which is a very interesting topic, so the indeclinable participle or gerund in Sanskrit grammar called tvanta, then perhaps the best way how to interpret in Latvian would be using declinable active participle. And let me demonstrate you some samples. So if we have a very simple sentence, in Sanskrit, Ramo Nagaram Gatva Prasaram Pravisya Nrpam Namati. So in German we would have Nachdem Rama in die Stadt gegangen war und den Palast betreten hatte, begrüßt den König. So in English, having gone to the city and having entered the palace, Rama greets the king. And again, in Latvian, we have the economy of words because we have the same or nearly the same concept of construction of the participle. So, aizgājis uz pilsētu un ienācis pilī, Rāma sveicina karali. And now let me show you one more sample of participle. And in this case, we are talking about the present participle active, or in Sanskrit called Vartamane Krudanta, versus present participle active in Latvian. And we can use for interpretation two types actually, semi-declinable or indeclinable. And let me show you that with sample sentences. Again, very simple sentence. Ramo vanam gachan, gajam pashati. And in German, während Rama in den Wald geht, sieht einen Elefanten. And in English, while going to the forest, Rama sees an elephant. And in Latvian, we can have two versions. We can have semi-declinable, iedams uz mežu, Rāma redz ziloni, or another version with indeclinable participle ejot uz mežu, Rāma redz ziloni. And to conclude my presentation, I just would like to give you one small verse from folk songs describing the beauty or the importance of the language. And here I have given my very humble interpretation or translation of this verse. So don't be judgmental. It's just to convey the message and the beauty and the concise language of the Latvian folk song. So let me read it out for you first in Latvian. Mazs bija mans augumiņš, skaidra mana valodiņa. Mazajam augumam palīdz gudra valodiņa. And in English, of course, it's difficult to transfer all the diminutives of Latvian language, but let me try. Small is my figure, clear is my language. A clever language helps to a small figure. So thank you very much for your attention and interest in this very specific topic, and I hope that this will induce further interest and further collaboration between Latvian and Indian scientists to collaborate on some interdisciplinary and linguistic projects. Thank you. And these are just a few glimpses into Latvian traditional celebrations, and this is Ūsiņš Day, which starts the summer or summer time in Latvia. And there you can see Latvian attires. And this is the 12th century woman's attire from Latgale region. So thank you very much.
Dear Dr. Chinmay Pandya, dear audience, my name is Sanita Siliņa, and it's a big honor for me to participate in this e-summit, which has been organized by Dev Sanskriti Vishwavidyalaya University and by the Center for Baltic Culture and Studies of Asia. I also had an opportunity to visit the center and was really surprised and fascinated by the fact that there are all these teachings, which are so interrelated with my area of interest and so linked to the path of yoga and Ayurveda. But before we move on, I would like to invite you all to spend a few seconds in silence, just for tuning in. So please close your eyes, deep breath in, deep breath out. Just observe the flow of your breath. Okay, now please open your eyes, and I will move on with the topic of today's presentation, and it is linked to the research which I carried out a few years ago, and it is linked to the competency profile of a yoga teacher working with diverse audiences, especially with the practitioners who have special needs. So let's move to the slide presentation.
Yoga teachers' professional competence development when working with diverse learners. Why a competency model? The choice has been driven by my interest and my experience in studying yoga as well as teaching yoga. I've been working with adults having special needs, including hearing and speech impairment, vision impairment, and mobility impairment. The intention of this study is to establish the set of competencies suggested for a yoga teacher and develop it with every single new case in a yoga class, with the respect of the differences and needs of individuals. There was a project proposed by the Red Cross Latvia, yoga classes for people with special needs. And here you can see some representatives of the participants of the class. When rishis of ancient times envisaged yoga philosophy and practices, apparently they didn't intend yoga to be practiced only by people of one country, of one culture, one language, or one color. The rishis created a system that uplifts human beings. Let's see some of the key words in the vision of the United Nations. World free of fear, ensuring physical, mental, and social well-being, equality, non-discrimination, race, ethnicity, and cultural diversity, full realization of human potential, open and socially inclusive world, harmony with nature, and it all comes together with their resolution for the International Day of Yoga, saying that yoga provides a holistic approach to health and well-being. According to Sanskrit glossary of yogic terms, yoga comes from the root yuj, meaning to join, to yoke, to concentrate on one's attention. It also means union, communion, and And the other definition provided by Hatha Yoga Pradipika means that yoga is the process of uniting opposing forces in the body and mind in order to realize the spiritual essence of being. And there is one more quite short definition provided by my teacher of Nidra Yoga, Mr. André Riel, who says that yoga is the state of unity. Ayush also provides an outline on what is yoga. Yoga is essentially a spiritual discipline based on an extremely subtle science which focuses on bringing harmony between mind and body. It is an art and science for healthy living. According to yogic scriptures, the practice of yoga leads to the union of an individual consciousness with the universal consciousness. According to modern scientists, everything in the universe is just a manifestation of the same quantum firmament. One who experiences this oneness of existence is said to be in yoga and is termed as a yogi who has attained a state of freedom. The aim of yoga practice, sadhana, is to overcome all kinds of sufferings that lead to the sense of freedom in every walk of life, with holistic health, happiness, and harmony. What is a competence? Although there are some differences between competence and competency in some contexts, in many dictionaries they are given as synonyms. Competence, to do something successfully and efficiently. Competency, let's look at the etymology from Latin competentia, meeting together, agreement, symmetry. So it means sufficiency to satisfy the wants of life. And sufficiency of qualification from competence, which is present participle of competere. There have been many competence models designed, but for the purpose of this study I looked at few of them, and one is model of occupational competence meant for self-governing professions. And in this model, for me, an important aspect was the outer circle, including ethos, ethics, and judgment. And I'll come back to this later. Another model, holistic model of competence, which includes cognitive competence, functional competence, social competence, and meta-competence. And in another shape, you can see it as a triangle with the three competences at the outer corners and meta-competence as an overarching competence in middle. Competency framework of a yoga teacher is based on professional profiles, on the input from learners or yoga practitioners, input from international yoga teachers, and also my own input based on self-observation. Regarding yoga teachers' qualification, several profiles were examined. Two from India, 2 from Latvia, 1 from Europe, 1 from the United States. So there are formal documents defining the profiles of yoga teachers, yoga masters, yoga instructors. In India, for example, there is a yoga instructor, which is level 1, and then level 2 would be for yoga teacher, yoga master, and yoga guru. The latter ones are combined in one profile. And it's been defined by Quality Council of India. In Latvia, there is a classificatory of professions, profesiju classificators, which defines 2. One is yoga specialist and the other is yoga master. Then in the European Yoga Union, there is a profile definition of a yoga teacher. And since I've been working with people who have special needs, I also chose to look at the profile of a yoga therapist from International Association of Yoga Therapists. Regarding the input from stakeholders, in order to establish the competencies, there were teachers, yoga teachers, learners or practitioners, and myself as a teacher and also as a student. Regarding the yoga teachers, I did an international questionnaire asking to provide 3 most important yoga teachers' competencies according to them. Regarding learners, it's been quite a diverse group. Just to give an example, I had to lead yoga classes in Latvian language, but there was one lady who had a vision impairment and she didn't speak any Latvian. She was a Russian lady, so it meant that she couldn't see what I was doing, and I had to translate the instructions also in Russian language. Then there was another lady who had hearing impairment. She couldn't hear what I was saying, so I had to sit in front of her that she could read my lips and look at my gestures. Then there was a Latvian lady from Great Britain, and she didn't speak any Russian language. So again, I had to do some adjustments for her. Then there was the man who had a mobility impairment. He was in a wheelchair. So I had to adjust some physical exercises for him. And what I did regarding the input from the learners, first of all, those were my observations during the class, but also I did interviews with them before starting the class and then throughout the classes of the 3 months, measuring the progress. And regarding my self-observation, I did self-study. I received feedback from the learners and from the colleagues. Also, I kept a diary and monitored the progress of the yoga classes and of the learners. And here you can see some participants from the yoga classes of the Red Cross. I was inspired by a multidimensional holistic competence approach. The model was shown in the beginning of this presentation. It consists of 3 corner dimensions: cognitive competence, which is knowledge; functional competence, skills; social competence, attitude and behavior. And then there is another dimension, meta competence, which is different from the first 3, since it's concerned with the facilitating the acquisition of other substantive competences. So meta competences are overarching ability, and they are usually said to include learning, adapting, anticipating, and creating change. Consequently, the competence model of a yoga teacher is presented in a form of a tetrahedron, at the center of which there is a goal of a yoga practice, state of unity, and there are core competencies at the base. First of them is cognitive competence, which is knowledge. So it is knowledge of yoga theory, philosophy, tradition, knowledge of human body, of psyche and emotions, pedagogy, or also andragogy, which is adult learning, as well as diversity. Functional competence, skills. This would include designing a curriculum, demonstration of yogic techniques and guidance of practice, corrective actions during the class, as well as suggesting alternative solutions. Also, art of leading the class, communication during the class and transmitting the teaching, as well as providing the theoretical background to the participants. Social competence, which is more about inner attitude, behavior, which is expected to be positive and inclusive, with affection, kindness, and humbleness, filled with discipline and determination, flexibility and openness, as well as creativity. And then the meta competence, which is an overarching competence, which includes self-inquiry and learning to learn, unleash other learners' potential, attentiveness to every detail during the class, sensing, awareness here and now, and also being a disciple of consciousness. And then taken from the other competence model, where there was the outer round circle, including ethos and ethics and judgment. Here those would be yama and niyama, which is also the ethical behavior of a yoga teacher. So the next steps for a yoga teacher to progress, to look at the defined competency model, and design a professional development program for this teacher based on the necessary competencies. In the program, the gaps for the development would be identified. We would seek for the development tools and methods, design a development plan, and after training or developing certain competencies, the progress would be measured. Competency model may serve as a roadmap for a smoother transition of the teachings.
Just to conclude, the model I have been presenting is one of the frameworks which could be used in order to establish the competencies of the yoga teacher, also of a yoga practitioner, of a yoga student. But we have to remember the main goal to be in a state of unity, or to move towards the state of unity. So the competency model always remains open, especially nowadays where there are so many changes and fast changes. So we have to be able to adapt to the new circumstances, and also encourage the practitioners to adapt to new circumstances, like using technologies, but still not forgetting about the tradition and honoring the tradition as well. And one more thing, if there are no students, there is no teacher, or vice versa. There is no space for teaching to come in. But if there are both, a teacher and a student, in a perceptive state with an open mind, then the teaching is invited. And also a very important thing to remember in these challenging times, to practice gratitude. Therefore, I'm really very grateful to all my teachers, to all my students. Thank you. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Hello everyone, namaste. I really hope you all are well and safe during pandemic. My name is Kate and I'm really happy to take part in this amazing panel discussion on yoga and complementary and alternative medicine. Just to make clear why I'm here today sharing my presentation with you, I would like to mention that currently I'm working as a yoga teacher in Latvia, in Riga, and I can say that I mostly am giving fitness yoga classes, which somehow can mean that I am representing yoga as a commercial industry in Latvia, but definitely not in a bad way, because by this I mean only that I'm giving yoga classes in a beautiful studio and taking some money for it. But all fundamentals are based on my academic studies of the traditional yoga philosophy at University of Latvia at Professor Arnis Siliņš, and after during my beautiful exchange program in dsvv University. I'm absolutely grateful for such opportunity to acquire so much knowledge during this short time of exchange program. So for today I prepared a small presentation. Maybe it's not so scientific and academic like all other speeches, because just to be honest, I'm not a science person, but I love what I do, and I am quite a long time in the industry of yoga. So I would like to show you how yoga has successfully integrated in Latvian society. So first of all, I would like to show you a short slideshow which shows how exactly yoga has integrated in Latvian society. So you can see that yoga became a part of many Latvians' lives, and I'm really happy about it because yoga is a beautiful gift from India that we are starting to invite in our lives. Now I would like to share with you a small research that I've done by interviewing my clients, some of my friends, asking them, why do people in Latvia love yoga so much? Why do they prefer yoga among all other physical activities? And I included in my presentation some of the interviews of real yogis of Latvia. Unfortunately, I couldn't include all of them because there were many, because the time of this presentation is limited. So here we are, some of the opinions of Latvian yogis.
I love yoga because it's good, not only for my health, but also for my mental health, which is especially important during this hectic time with the world pandemic. It helped me really distress after a day at work and forget about my busy life for at least, and give me some time to focus on myself and my mental health for at least an hour a day. That's why yoga is really great.
Yoga is definitely the best exercise for me, both physically and mentally. I just love the way my body feels during the exercise, and I can feel the pressure in all my muscles. But at the same time, it also helps me to get rid of the stress of some thoughts that are stuck in my head. So I just think it's the perfect balance of your physical and mental well-being.
Hi, my name is Kirill, and I practice yoga because during my life I did a lot of really intensive training in martial arts and other sports, and as a result I've picked up a lot of niggling injuries and have problems with my back. And yoga is the perfect cure for that, because not only does it build up your core strength, which is key to staying injury free and staying strong, it also helps with your flexibility, which is also key. And I wish I started doing it sooner. So to all young people who are passionate about sports, who perhaps are looking to become professional, I recommend doing core exercises and flexibility exercises more often, and yoga is perfect for that.
I analyzed all the interviews I made, the ones that you've just seen, and many others, which unfortunately weren't included in this presentation, and found out that there are actually three main points which people mention in regard to yoga as a lifestyle and why do they love yoga. First one was about finding inner balance. Many people admitted that after yoga class they feel more confident about themselves, about the future, more optimistic, and also they feel at the same time more relaxed and more concentrated. Second most popular answer was that many people perceive yoga as a complementary medicine. Like our topic of this panel discussion, yoga and complementary medicine. But many people perceive yoga as a complementary medicine itself, which helps to improve their health, in particular their joints, their muscles, and bones. And the third point was that yoga helps to reduce stress level. And people really feel that after yoga class they feel calmer, happier, and also more confident about the future, more optimistic. I think that this is amazing that people find so much good in yoga classes. As for me, at my classes, I'm mostly focusing on asanas and the right performance of them, as well as I'm paying much attention to pranayamas. Many people also mention pranayamas in their interviews, and I can absolutely relate. I find the different breathing techniques absolutely essential during yoga classes and during any physical activity. So we must really learn how to breathe correctly, because breathing is also one of the most important cleansing processes. Also, what is important for nowadays people who are living in big cities, to spend some quality time with themselves. That's why I find also important after class to give people 10-15 minutes just to dedicate it for themselves. And I call it relaxation or meditation part. And I think it should be at least 10 minutes. It's better if it is longer, but we all are very busy. So at least 10-15 minutes, and many people came to me after relaxation meditation part and said that after some time they really feel released, and their mind becomes brighter, they understand more about themselves, about their body. And I really wish more and more people become aware of themselves, of their feelings, of the world we are living in. I really wish you all stay strong, stay calm, stay optimistic. Everything will be fine. We are united. We are together. Take care of yourself, of your loved ones, and everything will be fine. Thank you for the attention. I really hope you enjoyed this small presentation, which wasn't too scientific. I must admit I'm not a science person, but it was about our reality of Latvia. Take care and thank you for the attention. Pranam.
Many thanks to all of our speakers. While all of our speakers today join us from similar backgrounds, each one of them has been able to capture our attention through the vast and unique sets of experiences that they have shared with us. We are so privileged to have them all here with us in this celebration, and we hope that you will embrace the insightful words that they have shared with all of us. And so this concludes the first session for our day today. We thank you for joining us in this first session, and please do stay tuned for our next session, which will be a valedictory session. And so that will commence sharply at 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time. So please do join us. We have one more power-packed session awaiting you. And for the time being, we bid you goodbye, and we look forward to joining you very shortly. Thank you and pranam.